Applause to Derek for a great work all day. Thank you so much. And please join me on stage, Sabine Yang-Schmidt. I'm super proud to have you with me today.
Thank you, Molly.
We can actually sit, which is nicer. And although this is the last panel of today, but during the conversation today, we had why to go to Asia, how to open the market, how to speak with investors, why there are more female founders there, culture barriers, maybe use it for success, how to grow in China, how to even think what was or what is the time that you're ready to go to China. And for you, Sabine, it's part of your DNA. Living, married, and lived in China for many years. Also raised the Berlin office in Beijing there. I'm super happy we met several years ago, but since then you grew up so much inside combination of economy and politics. And this is exactly our discussion today, our ping pong discussion today. So what would you like that the audience know about you?
Well, that the audience knows about me is first that I say a big hello to everybody who's joining here on site and also online. Hello. I'm very glad that, Mali, you give me the opportunity to share some information related to governments, politics, the interdependence of the two topics, and what it means for the scalability or like for innovation capacities, particularly for startups, but also for regular companies when doing business in or with Asia. That is basically something that I certainly want to share with you. And let me start with giving you some example. Doing business in Asia, so everybody who has international project experience here in this room or even online will probably know that nowadays if you want to get your numbers right, if you want to get information about your new target markets abroad, it can be a real headache to actually catch up with all the political developments that you find accompanying these topics. So for one thing, for example, you will find that there are a lot of different rules or regulations applying in your target markets abroad that you don't even understand because they're written in a language that you are not capable of. Or you will find yourself ending up in a country where you have a lot of bureaucracy, bureaucratic trouble. You run into scenarios facing corruption, or you're facing even worse like energy cutoffs all of a sudden. You have never ever expected that. Or like your business partners are suddenly withdrawing from your business deals and you have no clue why that is so. And even if you manage all of these things, still there may be some very troubling instances that come across the corner. Just all of a sudden, for example, that the borders will remain closed. And you have nothing to do about it. And if your business model was set up to have frequent business travels between two countries, this is definitely something that breaks your neck if you cannot access foreign markets anymore. So all of these are connected, all of these scenarios that I just mentioned to you are connected to political circumstances or reasons how politics work and interrelate with economics abroad. And when we start talking about these interdependencies of politics and economics here, also as the title of our speech today or like panel today is, I would like to particularly shift your focus to areas where we have, from a European point of view, a different system, a different political system that is not a liberal free market economy as we know it here, but is rather a system that is tending towards being a one-party-led state, or already is an authoritarian system led by one political figure only and having a top-down centralized structure that influences economic planning from a political elite top down. And in Asia, we have a number of such states that are either carrying the title of being a communist organized country, like Vietnam or China, or that are very close to be an authoritarian state. And what does it mean dealing with such countries?
You know, in another hand, we can call it do and don't before thinking that you are even able, capital-wise, team-wise, product-wise, to scale to Asia. And we will speak also about Asia, not necessarily China. I can tell you that when we worked in China, when my company had a production in China for 8 years, we had so many situations that if we wouldn't have a local people with us, we would probably close the company very fast. I mean, dealing with authorities, dealing with regulation that you cannot even imagine. So I think this discussion is a bit different. You know, after a full day of go to Asia, we say, okay, stop for a second, make sure you're ready and you understand. Culture-wise, okay, but also business-wise. What does it mean to open a company or to even have subsidiary or scale in Asia? And we're speaking in general. Of course, China and Asia, it's a different thing. And I would love you also to elaborate on that. But in general, you know, Sabine, why we even need to speak politics? Why politics is very effective on the business success?
Well, let me start with that systematic approach once more, because once you're operating in a system like, for example, in China, you're confronted with a system that is organized by the central party of the Communist Party of China, by the central organ, and they are drafting business plans in 5-year plans. So these 5-year plans give you an economic outlook on how things should develop. They're not necessarily oriented according to the status quo, what needs to be developed. It is not that from the economic, like let's say bottom, like you would know in a democracy, like the people elect and therewith determine what the future of their business politics will be. But it is the way around that the politics will influence the economic structure. So when you think about doing business in such a country where politics dominate economic developments, it is absolutely necessary to look at the politics in order to determine what you have to expect and in which areas you can actually be confronted with these risks that not only are lying in what companies usually look at in numbers. Because how the numbers will develop is just directed and guided by the politics. So, for example, if you would ignore such risks, I mean, like if I was a startup and now would look into a new market, like I would probably be looking at numbers, economic factors first. Numbers that can tell me something about, like, let's say, like the GDP growth. The GDP growth is a very important indicator when looking into new foreign markets, or like the amount and changes or developments of foreign direct investments. Give a lot of information about the openness of a foreign market towards new foreign investments. When I look at these numbers in countries that are not necessarily liberal market-oriented, free market-oriented, but are dominated by politics, we face situations in not only China, but also in, for example, in India, where the numbers are, by the means of the politics, supposed to be built upon new parameters. So what you know here is are like the indicators perhaps to compile a GDP. Like you have a number of, let's say, India 9.5% currently expected for 2021. Yeah? The parameters to actually come to the number of 9.5% may be completely different from what we know here would be the numbers. So in fact, we will be talking about two of the same kind of things, we would both be talking about a GDP, but the GDP abroad may have a completely different compilation as a backbone of compiling that number as it does here. And as such, you would build your business expectations or your business plans upon a completely waggling or like different construct than what you would expect. And I'll give you one example, Mali. For example, one of the very important indicators for the past several years has been for doing business abroad, has been the so-called Doing Business Index, which was initiated by the World Bank. The World Bank has compiled information, all kinds of different information that include like how stable the electricity supply is, until like how the GDP of a certain area develops, etc. And according to like different indicators, has compiled the attractiveness of a certain of 190 regions on this planet in order to make them comparable and show the attractiveness of doing business somewhere for a new investor. So if you were an investor and if you were looking for some indicators telling you about the growth or perspectives of being successful abroad, that would have been a very important indicator to give you some ideas how the numbers behind what everybody calls a very good and welcoming business scenario would be. And in fact, with the Doing Business Index, we faced a situation in which the Doing Business Index was just about 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, it came into the media that it was manipulated. The Chinese government exerted political pressure on the World Bank officials, and upon this political pressure, the numbers were falsified. So in fact, we have seen over at least the past several times for this annual Doing Business Index that the numbers for China upon like the political pressure that it exerted on the World Bank were manipulated. So if I was a company trying to get a clear and valid information about the prospectiveness of a new market, and if the numbers that I am supplied with are pillars.
Yeah, not our way for sure. But you know, China or Asia that I know when I started 2006, it's probably, you know, it's a different place. Today, Asia gained much more power, and us as a German startup, German investors, we're always keen to see what's happening there. We're always keen to have much more capital coming here and raise unicorns together. So to use their skills, their knowledge, and their capital as well to see much more scale-ups here. What I want to ask you is something that I see. The last time I was physically visiting China was 2015. It was a different place. And recently, again, politics-wise, is it not anymore, you know, China is copying, China is following, but actually China first? Because we see investors that they are struggling more than before to take capital out of Asia in general. And also we see that they have to take care local level before going abroad, which when I started, it was totally different. It was much easier.
Mali, you reached a very good point. With the current state presidency of Mr. Xi Jinping in China, we have seen a new era of developments, of political developments in China, and they started to become very visible roughly about 2014-15, just about the time when you said you were in China last. And what has happened in between is that many of the regulations, basically the economic direction of China has shifted from this opening up market that we have seen the decades before into a again more self-concentrated, more focused on domestic developments and strengthening of domestic markets, economy, and including many of the phenomena we had before in China already, when China was under the guidance of a different leader in the 60s and 70s, which means that currently we face a situation that not only the borders are closed, and they are officially closed according to health measures to prevent new COVID incidents coming into the country. But the question is reasonable to ask whether there is not also a political implication behind this closed border initiative, as China is focusing on what itself calls, if you read Chinese articles and news, what it calls a dual circulation. And this dual circulation is a combination of two different systems that should at some point touch each other. And at the one hand, we have the Chinese system, and at the other hand, we have the international system. And the idea that stands behind, and you can see throughout all the different economic plannings in China, is that China is going to dominate the international systems. And whatever if that means the United Nations systems that we are known to, like for example, like the World Trade Organization, if it comes to standards, to norms, to like regulations, international courts, all these things, even into the aspect of human rights, China has a new direction that it tries to develop as much as that it can dominate over what we already know as systems established in, let's say, a more Western liberal environment. And that, to answer your question, China first, definitely yes. China is concentrating on domestic strengthening much more than on international developments or international money inflow to China. And like a lot of companies actually react by setting a strategy to only produce in China for China, but not to engage with international markets anymore.
And let's see what it will bring us. So before we take kind of like all this risk and all the startup will run away with the idea of scaling there, maybe let's give some tips. What can you do as a startup, as a founder, as a company, to learn about politics, government, collaboration between Europe and Asia before you're really thinking about stepping into the market?
Well, number one tip is certainly that in today's business decisions to internationalize your projects, when you go to Asia, particularly into markets that are not, as I mentioned, like a liberal democracy-based system, that you think politics with it, that you get yourself sensibilized for political interdependencies with economics, the society, and more. Because this is crucial to everything that comes after. Once you have a feeling that you may run into different scenarios or different interests from those countries that have a different agenda, a political agenda to develop, you will also be sensibilized to develop your strategy according to the market's circumstances. And when you talk about political risks, it does not mean that you are demonizing a foreign market, but it rather means that you are establishing a capability to recognize what is happening around you. If you just open a newspaper, one of the most fancy words of these days international business sections is geopolitics or geoeconomics. You find Europe in between, like the Americas or like China, trying to find a new kind of setting, a new role for itself. that is connected to norms and standards, that is connected to new transformations in politics. And that actually means that there is new settings arising that you, if you want to do successful business, just have to face and manage in order to be successful in the long run. If you just, what many people actually do if they hear about politics and actually just want to do some economic exchange, do is just like blinding out all of that. You know, like there are no risks, they're nasty, I don't have time, I don't have money for doing any investigations. But once you're operating in countries that are dominated by the political agenda in terms of economic developments and incentives and so on and so forth, also influencing your cooperation potential as a foreign company in these markets, this is crucial for any enterprise to first have that sensibility and then reach out to the right partners in the local markets that help you to understand the markets better. Yeah, there are a lot of connection points that you can reach out to, and like abroad, you can reach out to chambers of commerces. You have the governments that can help you with information. You have a lot of consulting firms that work up the numbers for you and understand foreign markets better, and so on and so forth. But the first step is to have this sense for politics.
Sense is a very good word and important in business anyway, here or there. But you know, Sabine, you actually raised the office for Berlin in Beijing. And I was there to see it. And this discussion is actually unique because we really encourage the startup to scale, to work with other markets, to dream big, to go to Asia. I mean, this is part of building a significant global level company. But this discussion is like also, hey, stop, you know, red flag, be alert, do a lot of homework. So I don't want to close it like as in a negative things, although absolutely every market brings its own challenges. I would like to ask you, while you were there opening the office in Berlin, can you share with us some success stories? Is it a corporate? Is it startup? Is it subsidiary infrastructure that you really saw German startup, European startup coming to Asia, coming to China, and really made it?
Well, good question, Mali. Let me first add something to what I said before, before I'm going to answer your question. Because right now what you portray is the situation that companies from Europe go to Asia, but also like Asian companies come in here, face the same situation that in Europe, like a different system exists that is not structured the way that, for example, somebody coming from China is used to. So companies from abroad also face a lot of difficulties or differences here, obstacles, when doing business in what to them is like a foreign system, right? This is number one. And number two, to answer your question in order to figure out what kind of success stories I can report about. The Berlin Business Desk, or like business office in Beijing, that is an initiative by the Berlin Senate Department for Economics, was opened in 2019, and it was opened in having a political situation of like 2017, 18 kind of as a backbone. So then it was opened, and we've got somebody here in the audience that knows even better than I do what kind of criteria we had. And back then, the situation of political difficulties was a different one that we have in 2021. Within the 2.5 years that I opened this office, I had countless inquiries by startups, not only from Germany, but the majority was from here, from Berlin, about 3/4, but also from China in seeking for help, how to approach the other market. And what we have seen as a big success was actually the opening of this office as a first point of contact to deliver like crucial and neutral and valid information over what otherwise perhaps may be influenced in a political way somehow. That was one success story, I would say, that now there is a point of contact for startups and businesses to ask for assistance. And the other one was definitely that we had some network projects being built up between Berlin and China in order to foster exchange. To bring it down to the point of really new market cooperation projects, like new startups approaching China, was initiated and promoted by us through cooperation with a startup accelerator in China. And we are looking for the fruits, for harvesting the fruits of what we have seeded there in China over the next years.
Yeah, so if you plant the seed for a long run, and that's beauty. So everyone that's searching for much knowledge and implementation into Asia, Sabine is here. Thank you so much, Sabine, for this discussion.
Thank you, Mali.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madi. And good luck, Sabine, also.